Hello and welcome to another Blender tutorial. My name is Ethan and today we'll be going over the Solidify modifier in Blender. If you're new to Blender, you might not have used this yet. If you are an experienced Blender user, you probably definitely have. But what the Solidify modifier is that it takes any surface or any mesh that you've created and it's added a thickness to it. So if you have a 2D plane, just like a rectangle, you can add that, you can add thickness to it and turn it into a cube. And we will be going through that in a minute in the tutorial, but just so that I can show you here, there's some great material on the Blender website. Blender has a list in their Blender manual about all of the different types of modifiers and editors and, you know, everything to do with Blender. It's all in there. So I will put a link in the description of this video to this manual and to specifically the Solidify modifier, which you can see here. And this will run through everything you need to know, essentially, in Word format, how to use the Solidify modifier. So as I said, the Solidify modifier takes any surface and adds a thickness to it. And over here on the right, you can see this kind of tube. And in Blender, let's say you would have modeled the outside here, which would have been the rim. And then you would have applied the Solidify modifier to it, and it would have added the red thickness to it. So from the outer edge, you would have gone in, let's say maybe 2 mil from the rim, and it would have given you a surface like this. But we will go through all this in a minute. So as always, you start off with your default workspace when you open Blender, which is the classic camera, light source, and a cube. Now for today's tutorial, we're actually going to delete the cube, and we're going to put back in a cube. No, I'm only joking. What we're going to do is we're going to press Shift A and add in a plane, and that adds in a 2D, just a 4 meshes, a 4-point mesh. Now what we're going to do with this is we're going to add the Solidify modifier to it. So if we come over here to our tab and go to our modifier properties, in Generate, go down to Solidify. Now nothing is kind of really happened until you kind of zoom in. As you can see, there's now a little bit of thickness added to the 2D rectangle. Now this is just a default thickness that's been added. So if you come over here to the modifier, it's 0.01 of a meter. And what we can do is if we change that to 0.03, you can now see that it's been extruded down more. So effectively what's happening is that by using this, you can actually add a thickness to your model. So this is great for like creating your 2D shape first, if be however complicated it is, and then adding on the thickness to it later on if needed. But we'll keep it very simple for the moment and just go through it this way. So keep that 0.2, and it's resembling a stone slab at the moment because we haven't added any more to it. It's just a 2D plane with an offset. And if you come over here and you can turn it on and off in the real-time viewport, you can turn, and until you actually apply the modifier, this won't be set. So you can still make changes to your 2D and then keep the thickness on and off, and then actually apply it then later on if you need to. Just be sure you save first, just in case you need to go back. Next thing we have on here is offset. Offset is the action of changing which side of your model that you want the thickness to be applied to. So if we turn it back on and we change that now to, so it's at -1. If we change it to 1, you can see now that it's moving. So technically it's going from a -1 offset to a +1 offset. And if we turn off the viewport, it's technically after now extruding up, not downwards. So that's what the offset does. It just changes the direction of the offset that you apply. So just to give you a better example of how the Solidify modifier actually works, I've just brought in a cylinder, and we're going to go into Tab, come into our edit mode, and we're just going to delete the top face here. So now effectively you've got like a bin. So if you were creating a bin in Blender, this is how you would do it. Next we come back over here to our modifier section and add on the Solidify, and you just saw a little bit of a thickness being added on there. Just make that a little bigger. So now as you see that there has been a thickness applied to the 2D walls, we'll say the very thin walls, just the mesh, and now it actually has a thickness. Now I've just created this really weird shape in Blender, and what we're going to do is we're going to see, this is to test the even thickness function, which you would probably use if you're using it. But if I turn on the modifier here now, as you can see, it's extruding inwards from the faces and coming in like that. Okay, but as you can see, it's all kind of different thicknesses. So that this thickness is different to that thickness, this thickness is different to that thickness. But if we click even thickness, all the thickness around the faces have now been made the same. Now this is really good for if you have a lot of different surfaces, or you got a very big model. The only thing, especially for 3D printing, you want to keep an even thickness so that you don't have certain walls that are thinner than the other. But it might mean, if your model is very complicated, that the vertices actually pass into and inside one another, which means then you have to do an awful lot of cleanup. But there's a trade-off. You end up having consistent thickness around the model, but there's an element of cleanup required later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this cylinder and the Solidify modifier in conjunction with another modifier, just so you know how it works. So we're going to look at the subdivision subsurface with Solidify. Now as you can see, this, because the Solidify modifier is first, it's going to add thickness, and then subdivision is going to work second. So if we put subdivision first, it's subdivided, major nice looking nice shape, and then it's added, the Solidify has happened afterwards. It still maintains its thickness. Even if we said even thickness there, it's still going to maintain the thickness even after you've subdivided it down, because that's what it's meant to do. So if we come in here, and you can see how the model has changed. Because we've removed the top face here, it's given it a hard border, whereas down here it's a bit softer. But if we add on another subdivision down here, you can see how that changes. Now you can't actually edit, like let's say do an internal subdivision here, until you actually apply the Solidify modifier. And when you do that, you'll then have all these vertices coming in, going down and meeting in the center as well, much like the outside. Now you may be wondering what you could use the Solidify modifier on with a bit more of a use case. And it comes in really handy when you're designing helmets, especially helmets in Blender, because you will design with planes and extrusions and cubes and stuff, but at some point you're going to need to add thickness to them, so you'll be able to print them so that they'll be strong enough to print, and they're not just a one-line bit of code. So this is my Boba Fett helmet that I'm currently designing in Blender, and as you can see, just here in front of the eyes, there's thickness to it. Okay, and there's thickness back here, and there's thickness over here. And what I did originally was that I designed this front part with just planes, so that I got the shape of the helmet like it is here, and then I used the Solidify modifier to add on 5, 7 or 8 or 10 mil of a thickness to it, so that it would be strong enough to be printed. And that's essentially what you would use the Solidify modifier for, is to input thickness onto your props, so that when you're printing, you'll have walls and it'll be strong. If you're using it for animation, they'd be good for 3D walls for games or other things like that. And just a quick run through some of the other features that Solidify modifier does is that you can actually, so we're after extruding down here this 2D plane, and it's more of a cube now. But if we come down here and turn off fill, it stops putting the walls in, so you just actually ended up just having 2 mirrored planes. And if you apply that, then you can you can work with them, but it doesn't apply the other 4 walls around it. You can also do it with some vertices if you had a model and you just wanted to, apply thicknesses to a certain amount of vertices. You can also do that. And there's also 2 modes essentially in Solidify. There's simple, which is just very quick, very simple Solidify if you didn't have too much to do with it, or you can go complex, which gives you a bit more rules. So you got thickness, offset, merge threshold. And what the merge threshold is, as we come back here to the manual, the distance within which degenerated geometry is merged. And that's only in complex mode. And that's really everything from it. The Solidify modifier is definitely one of the more simpler modifiers you can use in Blender. It is definitely useful for 3D printing and creating different sort of scenes, for D&D miniatures or D&D walls, floors, for 3D printing. Animation as well, you can again create walls and doors with it. And again, it's just a simple modifier used to give your object thickness. But just be careful when you are using it, because you might have to do some mesh cleanup when meshes have intersected one another. But there you have it. That's just a very quick tutorial, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've liked this tutorial, please leave a comment down below, like the video, really helps us out, and thank you very much.